anybody's going to go through that door. So.
Okay.
That looks pretty hard all the way out around there as far as pulling out there. Yeah. Good fishing.
Really? Well, that... There's all those you see, but...
Well, the mechanic.
I've never bought any of those.
They're all high. I want to brainstorm today.
What is it? Not exactly.
Okay, there he is. You've met Childress, you know. Here we go. This is perfect. Okay.
Man, my nose is running.
Rod Maloy, thank you. First of all, the first question, which is the most important one, is how did you get connected with Rainey Sweeney?
Actually, I'm a Watts Flatsian, if you would want to call that, and Randy is originally a Niobian. And so we grew up basically 4 or 5 miles apart from each other. Right. Childhoods didn't run across each other, but families always knew each other, you know, and he was always around. And Randy's always been interested in racing, and with me racing, of course. There's one story that I could really tell you that how we initially got hooked up. I don't know if Randy wants me to tell the real story or not, but
I'll decide.
Okay. Oh yeah, you can edit it. I had been racing for several years, and of course Randy was hooked up with Quality Markets, and you know, in an upper, I think, vice president of sales at the time. And from the way I understand it, I hope I'm not mistaken. I don't know if you ever heard the name Chubb Frank.
Oh yeah.
From the way I understand, I might be mistaken here, Randy can clarify this, but I believe Chubb Frank made up a portfolio and presented it to Quality Markets for sponsorship, which I guess got the bells turning in Randy's head. And of course, at that time I had, you know, I had known Randy for a while, and that worked out to my advantage, because actually Randy is the one that contacted me to help me out with my racing program after that. So I guess in a way I have to thank Chubb for that.
Chubb broke the ice, and then you were able to at least be considered as a sponsor there.
He got the ball rolling for Quality Markets sponsoring a race team.
Now, you were graduated in 1976, but the story of how you got to be number 78 is kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, that was back when I was 17. We're doing this documentary from the Watts Flats Church, and I grew up on a farm about a mile from here. And of course, farm life isn't the easiest, and it's hard to get away at times. But as a kid, I always went to the racetrack. Mom and Dad would take me and my cousin over to the racetrack, drop us off, and he'd come pick us up. So so I guess I had the bug in me at that time. But a neighbor at that time had an old car in a field. Back then they started you out in a spectator class, and it was a spectator car. And so I go, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. So I approached it was just a young kid that had the car also. Why it was just sitting in the field, I don't know. But I purchased the car, and I'm sure I didn't pay over $25 for the race car. And it was a green car, which isn't supposed to be the luckiest, and it had the number on it was number 13. Mm-hmm. All right, so with me graduating in 1976, that would be when I was to graduate, I naturally wanted number 76, and also it was the bicentennial of the country.
Sure.
So I mean, 76 was really a huge number in aspect. But the problem with that is there was probably 4, 5, 6 other people that already had the same thought in their mind. So instead of dueling it out and just duplicate numbers and all that type of deal, the number 13 was an easy fix. the number 1 was easily turned into a 7, and the 3 easily turned into a 78. So there we go. That's the story behind it. Other than that, there is no other explanation why I picked that number.
And you've had 78 ever since?
Yes. And the odd thing of it is, you go traveling series and stuff, you don't see that number. It's not a predominant number for some reason. I don't know.
Interesting. Now, you went to the races, your mom and dad would take you there. Were they into racing at all, other than as a spectator?
I brought them in.
Okay.
Yes, they, when, like I said, I started out in the spectator division. Actually, that car that I'm talking about, in 1975, I took it to the racetrack one time and raced it, and it quit. And so I just brought it home. And a couple of my other buddies that lived here in Watts Flats also had a spectator, and they needed a motor. So I just sold them. I give them the motor out of that car, and so that was the end of my racing for '75. But so I guess that doesn't really count.
Now, prior to that, back in the '60s, you obviously went to Stateline just as a spectator person. Were there people you saw out there who were your role models, or somebody who said, gee, they're pretty special?
Yes, I guess. I wasn't really, my whole career, I guess, or even growing up, even NASCAR, I've never been a diehard fan of anybody. But back in the day, well, that's a good old saying, back in the, now I'm giving my age away, but back in the day anyways, I've got the same answer that everybody answers to that question. You know, it's a Bobby Snars, it's a Skip Furlow, it's a Ron Blackmer. It always, no matter how many interviews that you watch, those names constantly pop up as the people that were fan favorites and that you just enjoyed watching.
Now, Skip is from Watts Flats. Did your paths cross with his family's paths?
Actually, we are shirt-tail relation.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, it's the shirt tail's tucked in quite a ways, but we are relation. Yes.
Now, Rollerball Speedway is just a shot away from here. Was that something that your mom and dad talked about at all, or?
Oh, absolutely.
Did you go? How old are you?
I'm 54.
Okay, all right.
I think, yeah, that's right, yeah. I don't ever remember Rollerball. I guess I was there, but it's when my mother was pregnant, I believe. It's odd because a lot of the people that raced there grew up, you know, at the same age as my parents. All the names that you've mentioned, like a lot of the Jameses,
right,
they're all my relation. The Yeagers, they're my relation, you know, I mean, and they were all there, you know, at Rollerball Speedway.
Yeah, sure. So the Don McNitts, Red McNitts, did you guys know them at all?
I know Don very well,
yeah,
right to this day now, you know. His daughter and would be his son-in-law are very, very good friends of ours for several years now, yes.
I expect Don will be here tonight because he...
I would assume so, yes. Yeah.
So really you got started seriously in 1976, and I'm looking at this, you got a 69 holes.
Yep. Like I said, I was to graduate in '76, and that one time in '75, even though it didn't amount to nothing, is what threw the hook out and caught me. Even just that one time, it was a rush back then. So I bought a '69 Oldsmobile, and back then it was really crude what you had to do to it to turn it into a spectator. I mean, it's nothing like today. Basically, all I had is a 2-point roll bar in it, and that is basically about it. With angle braces down to it. You know, just knock the glass out of it and let it go.
In '76, you kind of had a memorable night where you it was the Maloy brothers were involved in kind of a top 3 race.
Yes, it's a memorable night actually. My brother, he's a little bit older than I am, but he also had a car in the spectator division, and he did pretty well also. he didn't have the longevity in the sport that I have. But one night I was fortunate enough to win the feature, and Larry is who I'm talking about, my brother, finished second, and that was pretty neat.
That first year, so was that your first win ever at Stateline?
That evening,
Yeah.
1 and 2. No, I had one before that.
What's the rush? When you get through cross, you get the checkered flag for the first time, what's the feeling?
Boy, that's a tough question there. I guess I really don't know. It's just your adrenaline is just pumping so high, but as you're racing, you don't have time to think about it.
Right.
But I mean, even to this day, sitting in the race car waiting to go out for a race, I could actually go to sleep. I mean, I'm just so relaxed, and I just don't get pumped up like that. But as soon as I'm on the racetrack, it's like you could flick a switch, and it's just an awesome feeling crossing under that checkered flag, being first. I mean, it's hard to explain. I mean, just like anybody else, a mountain skier coming down a mountain or something, it is just an awesome feeling.
You have raced spectator, cadet, sportsman, limited late. Is the driving different in each car? I mean, I realize the cars are different, but the reality of just the technique of driving against the competitor, or is it just the same?
Well, the competition in each class is brutal. It's hard. You can't say that the competition in the spectator class is any less than in the late model class. It's just different. I mean, because of the level of the car and the equipment and stuff. But I mean, the guys that, like I said, even right now that are racing the spectator class, I mean, they're racing just as hard to beat their competitors as I'm racing as hard to beat my competitors in the late model class. Yeah. It's just on a different level, is what it is.
Did you find that there was a conscious decision to go upgrade from the various spectators, cadets, sportsmen? Is that what your goal was, to ultimately get to limited late?
Oh, it's always probably everybody's goal to race late models. Right. I suppose when I started out racing, I didn't really expect to get there or know if I was going to get there, but in anybody's back of their mind, if they're doing it, they would like to race in that class. Unfortunately, I've had to work my way up progressively. Financially, I've never been able to skip classes and just go directly to a late model class. I'm not saying it was because of the experience level or not. It's just that I had to work my way up because of cars. I was just never fortunate enough to say, well, next year I'm going to go late model racing, because I just wasn't able to do it.
Right. What are the economics of cars? I know that nobody gets rich, and nobody's ever said they really ever made much money on it. I'll look to your wife too. Here.
It's probably the best way to answer that question. It's totally out of control right now.
Right.
I mean, I've always been the type of person to race within my means. I've had to, which has hindered me in the outcome possibly a little bit, but yet it's probably made me a better race car driver also. But to race in the late model class today, it is totally brutal. The money value is just, like I said, it's just out of control. I mean, as soon as the cars themselves, if you go buy a new rolling chassis from Rocket or something, you're going to pay $25,000 if you want.
Wow.
Good stuff. And then you're going to throw in, when you're talking about the motor, it's what you want to pay for a motor. They're paying $30,000, $40,000 for motors. I mean, it is just out of control. Shocks seem to be the high dollar item right now. Everybody's always looking for something, a secret to get ahead. And everybody right now seems to think that the shocks is what's making these cars go fast right now. And of course, as soon as the shock manufacturers hear this, if somebody starts winning on their shocks, I mean, they've jacked the price just dramatically on shocks right now, because, you know, you got to have them to win. That's what everybody seems to think anyways, you know.
What's the variables? In reality, you got a late model car, and there's a whole lot of regulations which sort of go with that. What are the variables which you could do different than Dick Barton or somebody else?
There is none, actually. I mean, there's certain, the only regulations on a late model car are basically a wheelbase and engine setback, and there's body height regulations in that. Anything else is good to go. I mean, if somebody figures something out that nobody else has figured out, which it doesn't really happen a whole lot, but I mean, anything is a go. It's just difficult.
So it's still room, though, for the imaginative mechanic who can decide that they can build a better mousetrap. They can.
Exactly, and it's, you know, if you can find something, somebody might drive a car one way that might work for them perfectly, but you know, and if that secret gets out, what setup they have, somebody else gets that, and it doesn't match their driving style at all, you know. So I mean, that could put them out to lunch totally.
Do you talk among yourselves, the late car guys? Do you visit their garage? They visit you? Is there that collegiality, but at the same time, kind of looking over peripheral vision?
Oh, everybody tries to say that they do. I've always been the type that I just do my own thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's sure, it's nice to think that you know what everybody else is doing and what's causing them to win or making them to win, but in the long run, it comes back what really works for you.
You had a story that you had one car that worked its way through 3 classes. How'd that work?
Poverty.
Good answer.
Yeah, actually, I'll start the story back, way back. Our guest speaker tonight is Skip Furlow, and this is a Gigolo chassis that Skip Furlow originally bought. He had great success with this car. He was one of the first to bring in a bought-in chassis. I don't know if this was the first one or not, but he had great success with this car. And he ran it several years with a bunch of feature wins. And from what the story I hear, he hated to get rid of it, but Steve Halpenny ended up with the car. Yeah. He ran it a couple years with good success. And he traded it, or he somehow or other, Craig Briggs ended up with the car, and he didn't really want to do anything because it was getting old at the time. And so Craig and I were good friends and hung out, and so I purchased a car from him. And at that time, I was running Sportsman, and here again, I had this big brainstorm. I thought I was ready to go to late model class. Well, I put the car together, and I ran it maybe a half a year with absolutely no success at all. Mm-hmm. And it was just horrible. So therefore, I mean, I wasn't ready for the late model class. And so what I did, halfway through, I had come out of the Sportsman class, which was still functional. So what I just pulled the front fenders off and downclassed it, and so I ran that car as a Sportsman. So there's two classes for me. The next couple years, I was able to work on the very same car to make it more like a Sportsman. There was more engine setback you could do to it. And so I ran it, I believe, 2 more years. And then Fritz Siemens at that time owned Stateline Erie's, and they eliminated the Sportsman class. Mm-hmm. And here I am, again, stuck in a hard place with no race car, basically. But this car wasn't nothing fancy. It wasn't a stub car or nothing. And so Franny sort of bent the rules for me to make this car legal to run it as a limited late. And so I pulled the motor back ahead and made everything legal for the limited class. And I had great success in the limited late class with that car. I won more features with that car than I've probably in the limited late class than I have in any other car that I've had. So I am one of the few that's probably run the same car in 3 different classes.
Subsequently, you had a car also where Craig Briggs was involved. It was nicknamed the Yugo car.
Yeah. You remember the Yugos? They come out?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
They were a little box car.
Yugoslavia, yeah.
Yeah. It was a joke. It got named Yugo as a joke because Craig, he was running late model at the time, and he seemed to always build fast race cars. And as I said before, we were good friends and stuff. So I talked him into building a new limited late chassis for me. And Craig was noted for doing things a little bit off the wall, and he always built a really light race car. And so this car was nicknamed the Yugo car because everybody said, "You go into the wall, you go get another car." And that's how the name Yugo come about. But that experience, somehow I seemed to have avoided that, and that car was around for several years.
Then finally the final step to the super lates.
Yes, I'll back up a couple years there. It was 1988 where Randy and I got hooked up, or I should say Quality Markets and I got hooked up through Randy Sweeney, and this was huge for my racing career. It opened up doors which I had not been able to open in the past, you know, on equipment-wise and stuff like that. So I'll sneak back. It was 1990. I jumped up to the late model class again. Mm-hmm. I jumped into it. I bought a 1-year-old Swartz race car, and I can't say as it was a horrible year, but I mean there was people that had a lot worse year than I did for being a rookie. So I guess it wasn't all that bad. I mean, at least this time I didn't have to take the fenders off and turn it into something else.
But you had a big night during 1990. You said you had a disappointing race at Raceway 7, and then you had an experience where you sort of cobbled up another car.
Yeah, for some odd reason, when I started racing late model, I seemed to think that I wanted to race 3 nights a weekend. I was racing Raceway 7 Friday nights, race Stateline Saturday evenings, and I'd raced Erie's on Sunday. So it was it was almost Labor Day, and well, it was Labor Day weekend actually, and Stateline most traditionally had, that's Sammy's car you're hearing out there, he's here now, but most traditionally Stateline had a big race for a Labor Day weekend. So I go to Raceway 7 on Friday night, and my engine seems to want to expire in that car, and I have no backup or nothing. So I come home, we drag the car home, and from my limited late days, I had steel block stuff laying around, just a bunch of parts. I mean, I had a bare block, I mean, steel heads laying over the corner with rust on them, I mean, crank sitting there. And so we get this big brainstorm. I'm going to put this motor together, we're going to put it in the race car, and we're going to the racetrack again. I mean, because a racer's nightmare is to miss a night of racing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, we come home, it was late that night. The guys, I had guys helping me, they pull the motor out while I'm assembling this engine, if you want to call it assembling. Everything was used on it. I put used bearings in it. Gaskets were used. I mean, rings were pulled out of boxes. I'm not even sure. But we put the darn thing together. I put it in the race car, and it was just a 355 that wasn't even probably good enough to even go into a spectator glass. And I put a bunch of gear to the car, because I knew it was going to be way down on power, so it was either gonna hold together or else it was gonna blow. And darn, I went to that race. I went to Stateline Speedway Saturday evening, and I come away with a win.
Wow.
It was something to remember.
Was that one of your first super late wins?
That was my very first super late race win. Yeah, so that's a double jeopardy there. That's one for not to forget.
No, exactly. You've had terrific success as a super late driver. Your successes all the way through as a driver. You're Rookie of the Year in 1990, and actually won some championships. Are there some highlights that you found that you look back today and say these are 2 or 3 races that were just really surprises, aside from the one you just talked about, which was amazing?
Yeah, I'm sure if any race car driver thinks back, there are always those instances. I've been fortunate to be able to win on a regular basis. I think this is my 36th year of racing, and yeah, 36. And there's probably not more than 5 or 6 years in my whole career that I went a year without winning a feature. So I'm pretty proud to be able to say that. But by far my biggest late model race to this date is a winning 100-lap race at the Stateline Speedway. I mean, I had purchased a new GRT, that was in 1999 when this happened, and I'd purchased a new car. Up until then I'd ran Swartz cars, and I'm the type of person that wants to try something different. Right. I mean, so I purchased a GRT car from Bob Close, and we put that together, and it was a good race car. But it took some time to figure things out on it and to become accustomed to it, and it was getting better all the time. And as the 100-lapper in the end of that I won was toward the end of the year, so at that time the car was getting much better. But I had to have some luck there. I mean, it's still a win, but luck always helps out too. I mean, there was a couple drivers that had flat tires that were leading. I mean, so by no way did I just go up and pass everybody for the win. I had some fortunate, times or something there to help me out to win it also. But I did win it, and I've got the trophy to prove it. Yeah.
During that extended time period, you've had to race against a lot of the folks who. Someone retired, obviously, while you were driving against them. Were there some guys you really, if it got down to that last lap or two, you really kind of hoped they weren't there, going one-on-one?
This is one question that you ask every interview, and I've been thinking in the back of my head that you're probably going to ask me, but I'm going to have to not answer it, because I might still be racing against them people right now. And if they watch this interview with names spoken, that wouldn't be too kosher. But no, I'm just kidding on that. But it's the truth. Yes, there is, but I'm still going to plead the fifth.
Well, someday we'll get that out.
Yeah, when I retire, come ask me that question again.
You mentioned in your bio you had 40 wins in the late model King of the Hill contest. How did that work?
Well, that's 40 late model wins.
Okay.
That's a couple King of the Hills in there. One thing I regret is I'm horrible on stats. My whole racing career, I've never really dictated this year to the next year. So all I can do is right now is guess on what my stats really are.
What was the King of the Hill? What was that? I'm not sure for the camera. What was the King of the Hill? Was it sort of a one-on-one kind of a...
Yes, it's a round robin deal where it's 2 cars at a time, and the winner goes on, and the loser is done and goes into the pits. So if there's, say, 30 cars for a King of the Hill event, 15 are done after the first deal, and it trickles down until last man standing.
Is it a four lap race?
Yeah, it's a small 2-3 somewhere in there, whatever they dictate.
Do they still do that?
They didn't do it last year, but up until last year, it was featured into the schedule. Yeah, each year Franny had always done that. I hated them. I hated them, you know, but for some reason I was always successful in them.
You won Drivers of the Year, Circuit Championships, and the thing I remember last year, you on your car was a significant tribute to Fritz Siemens. What was the relationship you had with Fritz?
Fritz Siemens. Boy, I'm going to run you out of tape on this one.
Try me.
Okay. All right. But, I got to know Fritz. He was one of the earliest sponsors that I ever obtained for my race car. He was a self-made man. He started out, of course, everybody knows his livelihood, but basically everything started from Siemens Auto Wrecking. And back in the day, there goes that saying again, race cars were built out of junkyards, unlike today. My brother and I, Larry, we needed some parts for race cars. That was back in the, I think it was just after I went into the limited light, or cadet. It was called cadet back there. And we went over and I got to know Franny and Lynn very well. And we just, personalities clicked. That's hard to say about Franny because he was his own man, but I mean, he took a liking to me for some reason. And he's by far my longest running sponsor, and I can never say enough about the man. I mean, when he bought Stateline Speedway, not that it was in a bad way in any way, but he helped bring back racing to this area again. I mean, he was a difficult man. Don't get me wrong. You didn't want to cross his path. I mean, but it didn't matter who he was either. I mean, I can speak personally. I can remember a run-in with him, but he's the type of person that forgive and forget, and we're back. I mean, you can hash it out with him and stuff. So Franny is probably very, very responsible for my racing career also. Throughout the years, he's been basically everything as far as sponsor-wise that he has owned or attributed to has been on my cars. I can say except for maybe 1 or 2 years since maybe 1979. And so after his passing 2 years ago, I believe, it was just something, I think Franny, I thought should be done. And also this year, I have Stateline Speedway on my car as one of the major sponsors. Jennifer has been kind enough to continue the relationship, I guess, that Franny has started. So whether the big guy knows it or not, he is still sponsoring me.
That's outstanding.
Yes.
When your garage burned down and you lost everything, including obviously the car and everything, was that a time you decided that you might want to just cash it in?
Yeah, I thought about it because unfortunately there's no insurance coverage for race cars. At least there wasn't for me anyways. Yeah. And that was in '99, so it took me 23 years to get to that point with the equipment I had. Mm-hmm. And there again, I was in no economic position just to go out and boom, have everything back again. So I mean, it was real close to being a reality of stopping me from racing. Yeah. I mean, it's because just everything, basically everything that I had worked for was gone just in an instant. Mm-hmm. I mean, the trailer, car, and that was a new car that year. I mean, there was just nothing to fall back onto.
What inspired you to get over that hump?
Stupidity. No, it's hard to say. I can say honestly right now that my racing career is fulfilled. I could probably give up racing right now, but this was in '99, and I guess I just wasn't ready to give up racing. I thought I was, but when a car become available and a few things worked out, I was there to jump on it, you know.
5 years later, you had another event which would have caused anybody to just sort of give it up, and that was in Little Valley.
Yes, I was injured. Little Valley is a very high-speed racetrack. The straightaways, it's the old horse track, so the straightaways, it's a 2.5-mile track, and I went there occasionally. One unfortunate night, I was involved in an accident. It was right at peak sunset time, where when you're going down, it doesn't matter whether it's the front stretch or the back stretch, but it was on the front stretch, where the sun was very blinding. And I got tangled up and got turned around, and I was setting sideways in the middle of the racetrack, about 3/4 of the way down, where unfortunately the speeds of the race cars are at the very maximum. And with the blinding sunlight coming into the guys that were coming toward me, I guess the visibility was very, very little, and I was hit right in the driver's door. I was star flighted from there to ECMC in Buffalo. I was knocked out. I don't think I've ever been knocked out in my life. That was the first time. I remember coming to, and the workers were there, and they asked me if I could take my helmet off. And I think I started to take my helmet off, and then I blacked out again. Then I think I come back to again twice more, but the one time I heard them say, the workers say, we're going to have to cut the car apart to get them out. And I spoke, you're not going to cut this car apart. And then I blacked out again, you know. But I would really like to go on another helicopter ride, one that I can remember though, because I don't even remember that. But I was fortunate enough. I got banged up pretty bad, and it took me 4 or 5 months to recover to the point where I was, you know, able to function. But I'm very, very fortunate to say that there is no lasting effects or anything, you know, that recovery that I wasn't able to overcome.
Do you agree?
A little brain damage.
Yeah.
There must have been some brain damage, because that following spring I was back in the race car again.
That certainly was kind of a low light. What's a funny thing when you sit back, Rod, and you say, "God darn it, Greg, you didn't ask this question." The funniest thing that happened either to you or to somebody else on the racetrack, what would it be?
Ooh, this is why I should have had a heads up on your questions. Funniest thing. Winning a golf cart race.
Golf cart race. Tell me about that.
I don't know. Franny always had these quirks where he wanted, you know, just try to amuse, you know, the people in the stands. And he come up with this brilliant idea to have a golf cart race where 2 people in a golf cart, and I think he used a broom, and you had to hit like a volleyball around one lap around the racetrack. And Mark Joy, he was a fellow racer, teamed up with me, and we took the checkered flag.
My God.
But as far as funny things, I mean, I guess I don't know without really needing some time to think about that one.
What's it like in the pits these days? Back in the old, doing interviews with the guys that drove in the 50s and 60s, and there would be something that happened on the track. All of a sudden, things would occur in the pits. You know, the guys who were the pit crews would go after somebody else in the pit crew, and there'd be, you know, a little muscling going on. Does that happen now?
You documented one of them on film. You wasn't going to let that one out, was you?
It's another story.
Okay.
But does that happen? I mean, did I just happen to catch a rare moment?
That was a little excessive, the one you caught, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, tempers are still there. I mean, competitiveness keeps you racing. And when something happens, you can go off kilter there. There are rules and are intact from the racetrack saying you're not supposed to go to another competitor's race car without an official. But sorry Jennifer, these rules aren't actually enforced to the max. It does happen. I mean, you're frustrated and in the heat of the moment. I will say on the upper level classes, it is more dealt with on a mature level than say, not that I'm in any way putting down the lower classes, but I mean, there's just a little more maturity that we've been racing longer. We know what we're dealing with, and hopefully it can be dealt between the two drivers. The bad part is when crews get into the problem, you know, I mean, it should be dealt between the drivers is what it really should be done with. But it still does happen.
What's the question, Randy, you've been hoping that we get on tape?
Rod, is there one car that you think back of that is, you know, that was the best one I ever raced?
I thought of that. Actually, 3 cars. I can't pick out of 3 cars. One was a 2000 Viper, which I was really successful with in 2001. I mean, I don't like I said, I don't keep records, but I mean, I dominated, you know, with that car. A lot of wins. I mean, I had Stateline points and circuit points won even before the last night of double points even. I just dominated. That car just worked very well. Another car is that 99 GRT that I was talking about that burned up in my garage fire. That was getting to, I'm very confident that that car was going to be on the same level. Well, that was before the Viper anyways, but, and the third car is the one I just retired last year. I ran it. It was an 03 back to an 03 Swartz car, and something about it. It was an old car when I got it. It just went. You know, I mean, you didn't have to caress it or no tender loving care. I mean, it just wanted to go. So I really, you throw them into a fishbowl and pick one out, and that's what it would be. But as far as a really super dominant car, there isn't one. But those 3 were really good race cars. And the old saying is, never get rid of a good race car, which everybody does, thinking that newer is better, but it doesn't really work that way.
What's your favorite song and why?
Boy, song and why. I thought he was going to ask me what my favorite TV show or something like that.
Well, your favorite saying here is, it's probably the same song, Satisfaction. Why is that?
Because of Satisfaction. It's not my favorite song, but that is what I like to say the most about my reputation and what I've been able to do over the years, because I have had a successful racing career, and I have done it with less than a lot of people have, and I have still been fortunate to beat them. Even to this day, even the start of the 2012 season, I'm in better position as far as race car and equipment than I have been in years. But my race car is a 2005. I'm still 7 years behind. But this is where the satisfaction comes in, because I'm still going to beat these guys. You know, I don't care. You know, I mean, so, and when you do beat the high dollar teams, which I race against, there's a lot of money over at Stateline, believe it or not. I mean, and when you beat them, you know, it's not money beating them, it's your skill and able to adapt to a race car that is really beating these guys. And so I feel, you know, I feel really good through my whole career. Unfortunately, I've been in the position to have to do this, but it's been successful, so I feel good about it.
What should I be asking him? What have I missed?
Why he's right, when he's going to give it up?
Every year she asks that.
And your answer is? Do you have a timetable?
No. It was almost last year, to tell you the truth.
And the car went?
Yeah, it's every year.
No. You said you wasn't going to speak. You got to turn the camera on her too. Then she'll run. But no, last year.
I give up complaining.
Yeah, last year it started out well. I won the first night up at Stateline, and
See YouTube. It's on YouTube.
absolutely, and it was all downhill after that, and it got to the point I almost have to race off my winnings. And if I'm not able to do that, it really hurts my racing program, because that's what keeps it going. And after that first win, the finishes weren't there, so the money wasn't coming in. So if something was, I wrecked a couple times, and without the money coming in, I couldn't reboot the car to where it should be. I was putting old parts on it, and just basically getting the car to the racetrack. And it's depressing. It really is, because the purpose of racing is to do well and to show your prominence. Well, toward the end of the year, that wasn't there, you know. And I've always said, you know, if I'm not competitive, there's no other purpose of doing this other than being competitive. And so at the end of the year, I had sort of conceded if nothing come about, they're really scaling the car back to, say, not even approaching sponsors. And if I had the car still available, you know, I would race it on my set terms. You know, if I wanted to go to the racetrack, I would or not. But then comes Randy. And like I said, Randy Sweeney, who I'm speaking about, has been a great help to my whole racing career. I mean, he goes clear back, like I said, and he's helped me with sponsorship throughout the years. Even when quality disappeared, he's always been there. And he approached me one evening, and he goes, basically asked me what it would take to continue racing next year. And I guess I didn't give him a large enough number for some reason, because here I am back again in 2012.
So he's your worst nightmare. now I get it. All right, Randy, have we still more questions?
The only question I would have, if I was an 18-year-old kid and I walked up to Rod Maloy and I said I wanted to get into racing, what advice might you give that 18-year-old kid?
Good question.
Don't try to do it for 36 years. I mean, not that I'm regretting it, don't get me wrong there. I mean, it's been awesome, you know. I mean, the highs blow away the lows, you know, not even close as far as that. But I don't know, you just have to explain to them that it's a big involvement. I mean, just saying you want to race a car doesn't mean that you're going to race a car. I mean, there's a lot of work and a lot of dedication there, and it can only go as far as you want it to. I mean, but by no means would I try to deter them. You know, basically they're going to have to find out on their own, like everybody else does. But it's truly it's something to remember in my part of it, anyways.
You've achieved so much, and I got to believe in the pecking order of things, and Randy Anderson would know, you know, where you are. You're right at the very top.
Well, that's flattering, you know, because I guess as anybody else, I don't really look back and see myself like that. I mean, like I said, I've been fortunate to be able to win and like that, but as far as being in the upper echelon or whatever you would want to call it, I mean, that's a flattering statement, and thank you.
Well, it just happens to be true. Well, thank you. This has been outstanding. You're an excellent interview.
Thank you. Thank you.
You really are. Now I can let you go out and look at your car. Thank you. Thanks for letting him do that.
Sure.
His agent, yeah. Paper.
Hi, Greg.
Hello, Sammy.
A lot of them come out of that way. Oh, yeah. A lot of them.
Off my jacket. It'll make everybody think it's warm. The sun is shining.
Is that what
Where are we going? Anywhere?
No, try to stay by the front corner. You'll see it.
Yeah, get that one on top right there.
Yeah, look, there you go. DNS glass, you know?
We may try a couple of different things here.
This is good. Access, very good.